Welcome in, everybody. Welcome back to the First and Orange podcast. Denver Post reporters Parker Gabriel here, Ryan McFadden there. Ryan, it's week one already.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to say that. Like the summer felt long, but at the same time, it went by really quick.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where you're like, it feels like training camp is 17 years old. And also, it's like, how are we already at this point where the Broncos are taking on the Raiders on Sunday, 2:25 p.m. local time here in Denver at Empower Field. We'll get into the matchup, obviously, and what it means just for the Broncos' first game that counts in the Sean Payton era, all of that. But Ryan, let's start just right off the bat here. With the roster obviously solidified last Tuesday, a week ago, right about now. And I say this with a little bit of a caveat that we have sort of like a work week left for the Broncos this week. But so far, for all of the, talking about how in flux the first 53 can be as of Tuesday night as we're recording this, it's actually been pretty stable for the Broncos since they finalized their 53-man roster a week ago. So let's just start there. When you look at this roster, like what jumps out to you, and what are you sort of looking for roster wise as we get into the regular season here?
I think one thing that kind of jumps out to me with the roster is like you can tell like so the Broncos really want to see what guys like Brandon Johnson, rookie Marvin Mims, and those guys they have on the receiving core can do. I think one of the things when Jerry Judy went down, I think my immediate reaction was, oh, what could that be a position they might go out and add another guy? But it
100%.
seems like they are confident in the talent of Marvin Mims. They're confident in the talent of Brandon Johnson, and maybe at the same time they're confident in Jerry Judy's recovery as well. I still, even though like when Judy gets back, I still feel like the wide receiver position is something to monitor around as we progress through the season. Because it could be a situation where, let's say, someone does like a Brandon Johnson does live to expectation, and at the same time they want to win. So could that be a position they might go in the trade market and trying to find someone, or maybe another free agent might come about. Let's say around like late October, early November. So that's like a one position I want to see. And then obviously you look at the defensive line. I think that's another position, like we said, going into it, that was kind of like a depth concern, but it seems like they're confident in guys like Elijah Garcia to help and provide that depth they're looking for at that position.
Yeah, it's funny that you nailed it, I think, because the two positions that really jump out to me are exactly those two. Because I think when we started training camp, I think they had 13 receivers at one point on the 90-man roster. And when you looked at the defensive line, you thought, okay, Zach Allen, DJ Jones, Matt Henningsen probably is going to make the roster as a guy who was here last year. And then, uh, Iwazurike got suspended right when camp started. Purcell's coming back from the knee injury. You didn't really know what you had in Elijah Garcia. Obviously, he's, prototype size-wise, but hadn't really shown it. You had all these depth questions on the one hand, and you had all these receivers on the other hand. And yet we get to cutdown day, and they're one of only 3 teams in the NFL that kept just 4 receivers. And they've got 6 defensive linemen playing, what's essentially going to be a 3-4. So those numbers I thought were really interesting. And the receiver thing, you can just take so much out of that. I don't think we know exactly what the right assumption is there, but there's one thing we do know, which is even if Jerry Judy, I think it's a stretch for him to play this weekend. What Sean Payton will not say anything about his status over the course of the week. We'll ask, he'll get mad, and that'll sort of be the way it goes all season probably. But they have to put a report out. If I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would think that, maybe they'll rule him out. Maybe he'll be questionable up until Sunday. He hasn't practiced since he injured his hamstring 2 weeks ago. So something to monitor there. But with the other 3 guys that are healthy, like the thing that we know essentially beyond a shadow of a doubt is if they sustain another injury, whether it's, this week in practice or in a game against the Raiders, they've got to do something, whether it's just sign Philip Dorsett to the active roster or little Jordan Humphrey. Both those guys are on the practice squad, or find somebody who's on the waiver wire. at the end of the day, like it won't really matter where they find a guy, but they don't have a lot of margin in terms of bodies in that room after they started with so many guys, and a couple of them got hurt, and then a bunch of them just got waived. Montreal Washington just didn't make the team. Marquez Callaway didn't make the team. A couple guys got hurt, obviously. So yeah, that's all pretty interesting. And then just in general right now, the way that they're going to use the practice squad all year will be something to watch. And that's maybe a little bit in the weeds, but you can call 2 guys up per week, and then, might both be receivers this weekend, depending on Jerry Jeudy's status. And then from there, you're basically just working through who can help on special teams. Where do you maybe have an injury on the roster? But they've got 23 offensive players and 27 defensive players on their active 53. So you'd imagine that the practice squad call-up guys, week to week at this point, likely would be offensive guys.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I think you're going to see. I feel like when it comes to those call-ups, I think it's going to be a lot with the receivers. Whether you might see Philip Dorsett one week, Jordan Humphrey another week. I think that's. I feel like the wide receiver room is going to be a constant change. Also, at the same time, I feel like their decisions of what they've done and the roster moves with that wide receiver room in particular makes me kind of assume that Greg Dulcich is going to have a really big role in the passing game. I know he's listed as Adam Trotman was listed as the number 1 tight end, but as Sean Payton has told us that he's not the type of guy that looks too deep in those unofficial depth charts. But I feel like the way they structured their wide receiver room, I just feel like Greg Dulcich is really going to have a big role in terms of in his as a pass catcher. So I'm looking forward to see how they utilize him as how many like receptions how many targets he's going to get, how many receptions he's going to get in the game, especially with like Judy sideline for mostly. It looks like it's going to be this week,
Yep.
but obviously we don't know what's going to be like afterwards. But yeah, that's it. That was like one position group that like kind of caught my eye because like you thought they would keep a little bit like maybe a little bit more. Based on what Judy's situation is, but then at the same time you got to realize they do have Dulcich, so that could kind of balance things out as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And Sean Payton obviously has a long history of using multiple running backs and figuring out a way to get multiple guys involved there. And so one of the things that we don't know for sure, I mean, I think I would have told you even a month ago or 4 months ago that early in the season, you would think that there would be a pretty solid carry share between Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. And Joe Lombardi said as much a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about getting Javonte Williams up to speed. Maybe he'll have, a full load. He was like, I don't quite know what full load means, but you monitor the carries maybe early in the season for Javonte as he keeps coming back from that knee injury. Samaje Perine has had a really nice camp. But the wild card in that is Jaleel McLaughlin, who's been just the sort of the story of camp. Mike McGlinchey the other day called him the star of camp. And so when you're talking about an undrafted rookie running back, the thing that you don't really know about that situation is what does Sean Payton have in mind for him? Is it spell work and a couple of targets here and kick return duties, or is it more substantial than that? And at every turn, he's been a little bit further ahead than I think anyone has expected. And so I guess I wouldn't be shocked if he had a somewhat substantial role in the game plan for Sunday. At the same time, he's a rookie and he's got to be able to handle all of it and all that. And he's passed every test to this point, but you just don't quite know what his role is going to be. But in any event, all 3 of those running backs can be guys that catch a ball out of the backfield. Like you said, you've got Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman. There's just going to be a lot of the passing game, obviously, maybe a heavier than normal percentage of the passing game is going to be elsewhere besides the wide receiver group, at least early in the year.
Oh yeah, you nailed it right there. I think so too. Just look at the running backs room, the type of talent they got there. All those guys have that pass catching ability. You saw in the second preseason game against the 49ers. I felt like all of like the majority of Javonte Williams snaps during that were like him trying to catching the ball and during those first few snaps. So you can tell that's what Payton wants to do with his running backs in that offense, and they all have the skill set to do it. I think one thing to keep in mind in terms of Jaleel McLaughlin's snap count and playing time, I think kind of also depends on what they expect Javonte Williams to do on Sunday. Because I know like Sean Payton did mention like he's one of those guys he feel like will have like a pitch count. We don't know what that pitch count would look like. And I don't know if that's something he will probably share between tomorrow
Probably
and
not saying
Friday.
like, "Oh yeah, Ryan, let me lay this out for you." I think I'm going to get him in on third downs. We have a great screen package for him, and also I'm hoping like maybe 8 to 12 touches.
So he's not gonna get that much into detail and probably get mad at someone if they ask. But I feel like given the fact that we are expecting Javonte Williams to have a pitch count, I felt there will be a situation where Jaleel is going to get some reps. And I'm looking forward to seeing that running back room because if Javonte Williams can get up to speed, and obviously we've seen what Shamazi P. Ryan's done. I thought he looked, like you said, had a really solid camp. They looked really solid in preseason. I think like he is a very strong guy, and there was times that during that Cardinals game in particular where I felt like they had a hard time just bringing him down.
Yeah.
And then they can also use him in pass blocking situations. So I feel like everyone similar to what Peyton said and about the tight ends room. I feel like the running back room also has like even though they have like similar skill sets in terms of the pass catching part, but I feel like they all have a role that they can like impact the team in a certain way. Yeah. I can't wait to see how Lombardi and Sean Payton utilize them throughout the year.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting. So that's a good transition just into week one. Obviously, there's so much intrigue in the Broncos being that it's the first game of Sean Payton's tenure here. It's a rivalry against a team that hasn't won a lot in recent years, but has dominated Denver. The last time the Broncos beat the Raiders, they were the Oakland Raiders. 6 straight going back to December of 2019, the last regular season game that the Raiders were, the Oakland Raiders was the last time Denver notched a win in this series. So there's all of that. And then there's just the simple fact that it's a chance to get off on the right foot. And this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, Ryan, so I apologize already, but there's been one of the things that Sean Payton has talked a lot about since he's got here has been that 2006 year in New Orleans, his first year there. And he keeps drawing, references from it, I think, because there's just nothing quite like a year one. Denver's had a lot of them. This is their third in 5 years with new coaches, but Sean Payton hasn't had one since 2006. And one of the things about that team was there was a lot of doubt about what their overall talent was. They were going to rely on a bunch of young players. They had drafted Reggie Bush in the first round. They ended up with a bunch of really good players out of that draft. Roman Harper was in the second round. They got Jari Evans and Zach Strief and Marcus Colston. And oh, by the way, it was also Drew Brees' first year in New Orleans, first year with Sean Payton, all this new stuff. And during the preseason, Payton told people, including the general manager, Mickey Loomis, that he didn't think they were going to win any games, that they were just bad. He was really down on them. And they figured out a way. They started 5-1, I think. They won their first couple games. And the whole thing, he probably, I'm sure he would have had success anyways. It's a butterfly effect type of thing. But he gives a lot of credit to the fact that a couple of early wins gave that team confidence in what they were doing and what he was selling to them. And that really set the stage. They went to the NFC Championship game. So I'm not saying Denver's going to the AFC Championship game this year, but I do think in terms of all the new, that a couple of wins early in the year against Las Vegas and Washington at home, which anywhere else on the schedule, you would look at those games and say those are games you got to win if you want to make the playoffs, could be really important. And vice versa, if you don't figure out a way to win those 2 games, the schedule gets brutal after that.
Yeah, I feel like this very game is, to me, I think is important for 3 reasons. Because you can set the tone for Sean Payton can set the tone for his era here in Denver. Russell Wilson has a chance to say, "Hey, I'm back." Last year, which was a fluke, I'm about to show you this is I'm back to who I am and who I was. And then, like you said, look at the schedule. You got Las Vegas week 1. I feel like that's a winnable game. They're not. I don't think they have some pieces there. You got Max Crosby, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Devontae Adams. But overall, that's a team with a lot of question marks, and I don't think they're going to be that good. Jimmy G is a solid quarterback, but he's at the same time, it's you have a really good game, they have a really average game. You have also the health issues there. So I feel like that's a winnable game. Obviously, the Commanders is another winnable game. I've always said like you don't sleep on them because they're a very good defensive team. I thought Sam Howell looked very sharp during preseason. Obviously, Terry McLaurin, like he's dealing with some injury problems right now. But with him and Jahad Dawson out there, I think that's a solid wide receivers. Two guys in the pack, two solid wide receivers. Then you have the Miami game. You have Chicago, and then you got probably excuse me, probably perhaps the biggest game on the schedule of the season is against the New York Jets. So I feel like I think the goal is to get off the right foot. This game is to me I feel like this week, even though it's week one, it's early. I feel like this is a must-win game in terms of setting the tone for Sean Payton to set the tone of what he's trying to do here in Denver. Also, too, when you look at the schedule, I feel like the goal is going to that New York Jets game is to be either at 500 or above 500. You would like them to be like 3-1, which in reality they can very well go into that Jets game 3-1. And I feel like if you do that, then it's like the way people will view the Broncos is a lot different. So That's why I feel like these first two games are very important in terms of setting that tone. You kind of you really want to be able to go into that game because after Chicago, you got New York, you got Kansas City, Green Bay, Kansas City again. Then you have the bye week, and then after the bye week, you're playing Buffalo on Monday Night Football. So I feel like taking care of business the first 4 weeks of the season is huge, and it starts with the Las Vegas Raiders.
That stretch when they go starting with the Jets, they play 4 games or 5 games, and in 4 of them, the quarterbacks they face are Rodgers, Mahomes twice, and then Josh Allen. Listen, it's Jimmy Garoppolo is a pretty good quarterback. He can clearly, run an offense efficiently. Tua has obviously put up big numbers last year and is coming into a big year. Like you said, Sam Howell has played well at times as a young guy in the league. Justin Fields is electric, but the first 4 quarterbacks they face are not like the quarterbacks they face over the middle stretch of the season. So you've got to find a way to get off on a good foot. Obviously, quarterback play is always going to matter. But when Broncos fans think about the Raiders, the quarterback's not normally the first place their mind goes. So I think I know sort of the keys of the game we'll get into here, Ryan. But if I was to say to you, hey, Denver's winning this game if they take care of X, what is that thing?
You have to contain Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
I think that's the key right there. I think that's one of the biggest keys is you have to contain him. When you look back at his numbers, 7 career games against the Broncos, 721 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. He rushed for over 100 yards in each of the 2 games last year. And this guy's one of the talented running backs in the league. Sean Payton said that. If you ask players in the locker room, they have said the same thing. He has dominated the Broncos throughout his career. I think if you could contain him, I think that's a key right there. And also, too, I think this would be a test for the offensive line. Yep. I think you got to, because they're going against Max Crosby, who's one of the more electric edge rushers in the league. And he's also, when you look at his numbers, he's also dominated the Broncos throughout his career, too. You're talking about 8 games, 36 total tackles, and 11.5 sacks. So it's right there. It's when you look at the key games, it's the offensive line got to win their battle. And I feel like on defense, they got to contain Josh Jacobs. I think those are 2 things right there. And then I feel like the rest can take care of itself. You're talking about a Raiders secondary who does not have a lot of talent. I know they added Marcus Peters, but we're not talking about all-pro Marcus Peters. Right. Last year, his final year with the Baltimore Ravens, I thought he was pretty inconsistent. So there were sometimes he looked good. There's sometimes he looked like a guy that's been battling the injury bug for the last couple of years. So I feel like they can give Russell Wilson a clean pocket and let him go to work. I think that would be key. So I think when you look at the keys to those games, I think those are 2 things that stand out to me: containing Josh Jacobs and provide protection up front.
Yeah, it's funny. so like the NFL would not have like the running backs in the NFL would not have the problem that they have if Josh Jacobs just like got to play against the Broncos all the time. Because you just pay, you'd be like, this guy, you know, he takes over every time he plays against Denver. It's amazing because I think almost like if you ask, I think we'll hear it this week as we're over there, and that's exactly where my mind went to those two matchups, which is incredible because the Raiders have maybe the best wide receiver on the planet in Devontae Adams, right? And the Broncos have maybe the best corner on the planet in Pat Surtain. And so you've got this matchup of like two of the guys who literally might be you know, the best at what they do. And they'll face each other sometimes. And one thing that'll be interesting is, you know, last time the first matchup, they didn't, you know, they play Devontae, like Josh McDaniels will put Devontae in the slot sometimes, get, you know, move him around, get him away from Pat. And it was interesting to watch Ejiro Evero, the defensive coordinator last year, kind of try to play that game. When are you going to match with Pat? When are you not? So one thing that will be fascinating to watch right from the jump is how much does Vance Joseph in his first game back as a defensive coordinator, like how does he want to deploy Pat Surtain to try to help slow down Devontae Adams? And then, you know, last year, Devontae ran, I mean, he ran one of the best routes you'll ever see a receiver run to win the game in overtime. They'd been running this big over route the whole game, and he just sold the hell out of it and ran it hard, stopped in his tracks and went back to the pylon. And you don't see Pat get, you know, left in the dust very often, but he, you know, Devontae did it to him, and it was a walk-off touchdown. So that matchup is one that's it's a budding, like it's about as good on good as you can get. And that's going to be really fun to watch the times when they're lined up against each other. But I tend to agree with you, Ryan. I mean, I think like, you know, Sean Payton he's built his best teams in New Orleans from the line of scrimmage out. And so if they can slow down Max Crosby and if they can slow down Josh Jacobs, two tasks that have been beyond the Broncos' capabilities the last couple of years, if they can turn the tables in those matchups, they're going to have a great chance to, you know, to get to 1-0 and have a win under their belts.
Oh yeah, and also too, this is a test for like Sean Payton said, this is a revamped offensive line.
Yeah,
like he called it like an extreme makeover home edition. What they did to the offensive line, added Mike Nicolinci, added then Paris getting Garrett Bowles back. So I feel like this is their big test right here. This is like we even though like I said, we're not. This is the Raiders are not a team like you're expecting to go to the playoffs or you're making it like a Super Bowl run. They're not that team. But I feel like they have players that they can test certain weaknesses the Broncos had, and I feel like Max Crosby is that guy who's going to test that offensive line, and it's gonna give us an idea. I know it's the first game, and there's many more games after that, but this is a good test for this offensive line. That was basically the emphasis throughout the offseason was that group. So if they can take care of business with him, you know, give Russell Wilson time in the pocket to you know make plays, create gaps for like Javonte Williams, Jamazi Piron to exploit. I feel like then it's like, okay, you're off to the right foot. So
yep.
I think that's the key. And then obviously, like you said, I feel like this is like Sean Payton. I feel like this is the year where it's like, could this be the year where like now you have Sean Payton at the helm and all this stuff around him? Could this be the year they can like break certain streaks? So like we talked about losing 6 straight games to the Raiders. Then the next step is could they finally, you know, knock off the Chiefs? So I feel like this is a really big game to like not only see what a Sean Payton offense will look like in Denver, because obviously he did say that, oh, I'm bringing a lot of stuff from New Orleans, but to see that with the personnel and the guys he have here, I'm looking forward to seeing. And also too, it's like we just hit it before. It's like you got to take care of these first 4 games for the Jets. Like that's huge. You don't want to go in there 1-3.
Yeah.
And you know, and you're playing against a team like the Jets team who has a lot of frustration. I'll say, I guess, a lot of frustration towards Sean Payton. So I think you want to go in there with like the right foot, and also too makes that game a little bit more appetizing. But first, take care of week 1. I feel like this is a winnable game for the Broncos. And I think it's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be closer. It's good. I think it's gonna be a close game, but I think the Broncos can pull it off.
There you go. Well, yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot and get your score in a minute. I think one of the things that, among all the things that are interesting to watch in week ones, it will be telling because we've seen preseason games and we've seen practice and all of that, but like this is the time where Sean Payton is putting the game plan together for keeps, right? Like it counts now, and so like he can't hide any longer. He can't obfuscate any longer what he thinks this team is, and I actually think he's been somewhat transparent about it over the course of camp. I mean, they want to run the football, they want to be physical. He doesn't want to have to put it in the air all the time. He might get in that mode every now and again, like a lot of coaches in the NFL do, but like they want it to be, on the ground. They want to run and play action and boot and get Russell Wilson out of the pocket and all of that. And it's the first real test of whether they can successfully do that. So it's it's here finally, almost. We got a couple days left. I was talking to Garrett Bowles in the locker room, the left tackle, obviously, on Monday. I asked him about what you were saying, kind of chemistry on the offensive line, where he thinks they're at. And he was like, look, man, I think you got to ask me that question in a couple weeks. Like, I think we're in a good spot, but you don't know until you go out there and play against somebody else. So that will be here sooner rather than later. Ryan, we end this podcast with a score prediction. I know it's early in the week. So, if the number's a little different by the time you make your prediction in the paper this weekend, I won't totally flame you on social media, but at this point, what do you got final score?
I think I'm looking at 24-20. Broncos get the dub. I think it's gonna be a close.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a close game. I think it's gonna be a lot closer than maybe some might expect. I think we are gonna see a little bit. We are gonna see I think from the beginning, we're gonna see a Broncos team that has a bunch of guys that are coming back from injury last year and working with a new coach. I think we're gonna see those growing pains. I feel like that's obvious when you have a new coach, a bunch of guys coming back from injury. You have a lot of. I feel like you have a lot of younger guys who are probably going to play a lot of key roles on both sides of the ball as well. So I feel like you're going to see those growing pains early on, but I do feel like they're going to settle down. I feel like Russ is going to make some plays down the stretch, and I feel like that defense is going to come through. But I got a 24-20 Broncos victory.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm right in a similar way. I'm going to pick the Broncos as well. Given everything I've watched the last 12 months, that I don't know why, but I guess it's just a gut feeling. I'm going to say 23-21 and maybe even a late clutch kick attempt for Will Lutz, the new kicker who Sean Payton traded with New Orleans to get back, a guy he knows and trusts, the heir apparent to Brandon McManus after an offseason of turmoil at the kicking position for the Broncos. So yeah, if you got 23 points, your kicker's probably involved heavily in some way, shape, or form. I think relatively low scoring, ugly probably at times, and maybe some flashes of what Sean Payton thinks this offense can be. So both of us picking the Broncos. We'll see how that goes on Sunday. In the meantime, keep an eye on denverpost.com/Broncos. We're going to be trying out some new video stuff over the course of the week. We've got a ton of content, obviously, in the good old fashioned print newspaper. If you can find the special section ran on Sunday last week, you can find it online too. A lot of the stuff that was in it, a ton of good work from a whole bunch of people here at the Denver Post, 60 pages worth in last Sunday's paper. So football season's here, Ryan. It's week one. Away we go. Ryan McFadden. I'm Parker Gabriel. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the Denver Post. Keep reading, and we will see you guys down the way. Thanks.